I'm just going to start the meeting over for our webcast. So welcome to our special council meeting of January 17th, 2022. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. First item of business is conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, I'll move on. I'll also mention that Councillor Jordan Saylor will not be in attendance this evening. He sent his regrets. He's not feeling well. Moving on to item 2.1, acceptance of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated? Councillor Beekman, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to business arising from the minutes, item 4.1, follow-up of the joint high school multi-use recreation center. Our CAO, Kaylin Hastings, is going to be presenting this evening, and I'd just like to introduce our panel this evening. We have guests, Dan Westwood and Jesse Potry of FWBA Architects. We have Dexter Durfee, Secretary Treasurer for Palliser, and Colin Ward and Bill Scales of Ward Brothers Construction. So welcome. And I'll pass it on to our CAO, Kaylin. Please take it.
Thank you, Mayor Van Ryn. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with the most recent tender results of the Multi-Use Recreation Centre, and further, to request direction on how to proceed with the project, given the significant material cost escalation experienced as a result of global supply chain issues. In the staff report provided, I included a detailed timeline of the project's history to show how we got to where we are today. Based on feedback from the 500 plus participants in the fall-winter 2019-2020 engagement and the Sport and Rec working group sessions, a small number of design options were presented to Council at the regular Council meeting of May 12, 2020. Following this presentation and the design options presented, Council approved the revised schematic design that was presented by FWBA, directing staff to proceed to detailed design. The general sense from stakeholders was to get the shell right and grow into and phase in the amenities later, if needed, as opposed to going with a smaller but more completed footprint that would be difficult to exchange or expand later. That is, the fear of outgrowing something before it even opens. At the regular Council meeting of May 12, 2020, Council approved the revised schematic design for the project, recognizing that the conceptual design changes selected would necessitate that the capital construction budget would need to go from 10 million to the neighborhood of 13 million, with budget deliberations taking place later that November. In response to the revised schematic drawing that was approved by Council at the regular Council meeting of May 12, 2020, the Class C cost estimate from Tech Cost, which attached, was completed on October 20th, 2020. It initially came in at an estimated price of $13,955,000. Feedback was received that this was too high. The design consultants made changes to the floor plan and reduced the size of the multi-use rec center by 372 square meters, about 4,000 square feet, thus bringing the total estimated cost down to $13,263,969. It was understood that the separate add-on prices for the running track, squash court, dasher boards would be covered through future fundraising in what would later become the Coaldale Strong campaign. The capital construction budget for the multi-use rec center was changed to $13 million due to the revised design and the schematic layout that was selected by Council as part of the 2021 budget deliberation process, starting with the special Council meeting of November 5th, 2020. The Council meeting where the capital budget for the multi-use rec center was officially changed to $13 million took place at the regular Council meeting of November 23rd, 2020. On January 26, 2021, the Class B Design Development Cost Consultants Report, also attached, estimated that the base building shell of the multi-use rec center project would cost the town an estimated $12,820,000, including a design contingency of $639,184. The nice-to-have amenities, that is, the deletable line items, they were enumerated separately in the form of cash allowances with the plan that these items would be covered through fundraising efforts. On February 10th, 2021, tech cost decreased its previous base cost estimate of January 26, 2021 by $89,000, also attached. As an additional cost-saving measure, the decision was made to eliminate a number of skylights throughout the recreational portion of the building, effectively reducing the budget by $177,000. In March 2021, detailed design of the multi-use rec center was completed and the town was ready for tender. It was around this time that funding for the high school portion of the joint high school rec center project was announced by the province of Alberta. Town administration was advised by both the cost consultants and architects that due to economies of scale and cost-sharing opportunities, such as the parking lot and mechanical room, that shared fourth wall, as well as services, that it would be far more economical to wait for Palliser School Division to catch up and complete the design of their side of the project, so both the school and rec center could be tendered at the same time using a single contractor representing both parties. Since the town decided to wait for Palliser to complete detailed design of the school portion of the project, the multi-use recreation center project did not go out for tender in March 2021 as previously planned. From March 2021 to June 2021, concerns about escalating material costs due to supply chain issues brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic were mounting. In order to allow the project to proceed as quickly as possible, in order to beat the winter weather, to avoid supply shortages and further cost escalation in materials, the decision was made to put an RFP out for a construction management firm. Following a competitive RFP process posted on July 24th, 2021 on the Alberta Purchasing Connection, that was jointly evaluated by both Palliser and the town, Ward Brothers Construction emerged as the highest scoring proponent. Having a joint construction manager on board allowed the parties to tender out the project in phases while detailed design for the school portion of the project took place. With material prices increasing by the month, this was viewed as the most cost-effective and timely method of construction. It is the main reason why earthworks, for instance, got completed before freeze-up, and why steel was ordered in October, thereby locking in pricing and getting in the queue before experiencing further price increases and/or delays in delivery. On September 21st, 2021, the Class A 90% Design Cost Consultants report, attached, estimated that the base building shell of the multi-use rec center project would cost the town an estimated $14,139,967. With deletable cash allowances to be funded through the Coldell Strong campaign, the total estimated price of construction came in at $15,973,000. On December 20th, 2021, Council adjusted the budget of the multi-use recreation center to $15,575,000, of which $750,000 was for architectural design fees and inspections, following the conclusion of the 2022 budget deliberation process. And this brings us to the focal topic of discussion. Tender 3, the third and final construction tender, closed on December 20th, 2021. The town's share of the joint tender came in $2,694,210 higher than the previously approved construction budget of $15 million. Now that a broad overview of how we got here has been provided, we will unpack the $2,694,000 net overage for construction to show Council the primary sources of escalation relating to the multi-use recreation center. At this time, I'll pass the mic over to Ward Brothers Construction, in particular Bill Scales, to provide Council with a bit of a commentary on where the highs came in, as well as the lows, as well as some commentary on the breadth of trade coverage that was provided in response to these tenders.
Okay, thanks, Kalen. So in the report here, there's some numbers outlined that show some of the higher valued trade scopes and how many bids were received and how much higher we were than the expected budget. So structural steel, mechanical, and electrical were definitely three of the larger ones. It should be noted though, like we received the 3 bids for structural, 6 bids for mechanical, and 4 for electrical. And that's really just a sample of the really good coverage we received across the board. Of our entire trade scope value, we received at least 3 bids and even more in most cases for north of 89% of that value. So we really, as much as things are moving upwards in the market, still very competitive, still lots of interest, and especially in this project in Southern Alberta, really gauged a lot of interest in the trades. So that's a sample of really what we saw for some really good coverage in the trade market, which was great. And really, the next section here talks about the unprecedented times, and really this is something we haven't seen in a long time, or really ever. The escalation we're seeing with the trades and the high numbers that are coming in, and it's really people not knowing where things are going, and there's a lot of escalation going on and things in the market. So it's very much unprecedented times, but the key is, I think, that we wanted to portray is that lots of competitiveness still, and lots of interest in the market here. So
I think the thing to be cognizant of is that the escalation is due to supply issues of materials, and that is really stemming a lot from the price of steel just going crazy. And other things that are affected are mechanical and electrical equipment that, of course, have a lot of steel content. And I think we should not lose focus of the benefits that came from the partnership, and that is that if the rec center was to be built alone, if you were to wait and try to do this again, we suspect that the cost of the rec center would be more than $25 million. And this is because you would lose the benefits of the partnership, which primarily consist of the cost sharing that you've been able to enjoy. That includes the sharing of the services that are required to the site, the shared parking that's occurring, the mechanical plant is being shared. There's an economy of scale by bringing these two projects together that is still in excess of 20% by our cost consultants indicators. And finally, the demising wall that shares the two projects, that shared wall is being mainly funded by the school. So there's a series of cost savings that are being enjoyed by the fact that you're still together on this project.
One of the questions that we think that we've been asked before is, what is the town in for? So currently, just to remind everybody, your tender packages 1 and 2 combined are a total of $4 million. But what you need to remember is that does not take into account anything from tender package 3, which is the shared spaces that Dan just talked about, the mechanical, electrical systems. Those things haven't been factored in to your $4 million. So there would need to be some math done, there would be some redesigning done, there would be some extra costs if you choose not to proceed with this. So just to keep that in mind, you have to factor with some more numbers in. So, but we figured that might be a question that you would be asking. So.
Okay, thank you. So Colin or Bill, either one of you can answer this question for me. So since we posted this on the town website on Friday, a couple of questions that I've been asked, and it's a question I have myself as well, is that the 3 tenders were phased over a course of several months, if not longer. So for me, if I'm building a brand new house and I'm going to go out for a price on what this house is going to cost, and I would do that all in one shot from a contractor. So explain to me, what was the reasoning why the tenders were spaced apart? Like we just went through this on December 20th, where there was a huge increase, and here we see ourselves today doing the exact same thing again. So just so that the people at home watching and for council's sake, explain to me the reasoning why they were phased.
Yeah, I think that the biggest factor in that is making sure that we're for what the items that are designed and ready to go, we can get started. So substructure and foundations, those things are designed early on, and we can get those things into the ground and get going. We can get structural steel procured. In this case, we were able to tender the structural steel in tender package 2. So those things, you're getting those things ahead, while the rest of the facility, the finishes and the envelope and the other things are still coming together. So the architects are still working on that. That design's still coming together, but you were able to get into the ground and get that early works going. That's the benefit.
So that poses the next question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dexter.
On that same line, I don't think anybody here has ever done a school project where we've had phase tendering like that. And part of that driving force too was, as we spoke to the people at Alberta Infrastructure, Alberta Education Capital departments, they were very concerned about especially the steel. They had some projects where steel had been ordered, purchase orders had been issued, it was en route, and companies, suppliers, even as late as today even, that are whoever bought them are being told that they've decided they aren't going to sell it for those prices and they're going to take it to the highest bidder. So there was a significant concern, so much in fact that the government, that I've never seen do it before, decided it was in the best interest to do some phase tendering so we knew that we could get the supply in time to do this project. So there was the factors of trying to get some work done when we had some good weather and whatnot, but there was also a global concern around supply of materials that we're still facing today. And obviously it escalated even further. I'm not sure what would have happened if we would have done, if we would have waited till now and did the steel now, because I'm not sure we could even get the steel at this point to go on. So there was a lot of factors there, but it was quite, I would say, out of the norm for government to approve a school board to do phase tendering in that manner.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
If I could just add, the reason why the school was behind is because although we were doing this as a joint venture, the school board did not receive its funding to go ahead with the school until quite a bit later than we anticipated. So although we had the schematic design done in tandem with the rec center, they did not get the money or the go-ahead to go with the school until quite late. So we were in the situation where the rec center was done and ready to go, but the school was not. And so what was the quickest way to get in the ground and take advantage of construction being advanced as quickly as possible was a sequential tender. And so that's why we ended up in the situation where we tendered the earthworks and the structural steel as soon as we could get the school up to speed and we could do it as one project. Because we all agreed, or the province agreed, that there would be value in the partnership. But unfortunately, the province did not fund the school as soon as we had hoped.
So just so I understand then, the phasing on a previous project that you've done with the school, did that get phased as well, or was that just one tender at the very beginning and it was given out to the successful bidder?
Typical projects in the past, every project that I've done except for one has been construction management. It's all been tendered in one shot. The other thing interesting about this project is it was a bit of a pilot where Palliser was able to work with government to do pre-planning. So in the past, once a school gets announced officially, then we begin the design process. Working with government so that we could have what we felt like was a better product was we did all the way through schematic design ahead of a formal approval with government support, and Palliser also willing to put some money on the table until they were funded to do that. But so, I mean, it's quite an interesting project from many standpoints. Phasing generally in the past in a school project just means in terms of modernizations where we phase so that we can move students around if we don't have space in the community for students when we modernize a school. But as far as the phasing, Dan could say, but I don't think there's ever been a case that we know of in the last 30 years anyway that they've done this progressive tendering just because of the economic situation in the world.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from council for our board that we have this evening? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through to Dexter, if I may. So 2 questions to you. One being that the school project is going ahead as we speak.
Yeah, so, well, I'll couch that a little bit. So our overage in terms of this, in terms of this project, we were a little over 6 million over on our portion of the project. However, that was beyond even the department, the Alberta Infrastructure Department, to do. So it is before Treasury, and I feel, enough to say publicly that we're confident that before the 20th, when the 30 days expires, that we will have approval to proceed. So, I would say, short of something disastrous, that yes, we will be prepared to sign off on these tenders on the 20th.
Okay. And just my final question to you then, the phased in the tendering of phasing in, basically what I'm hearing today is that in the old, up to COVID times, one tender package would have been the package. Now that it's being phased in, what I'm hearing, just more sort of high level thinking, is that it wouldn't have mattered if one tender package had gone out, because the cost of materials would have gone way over, and contingency funds wouldn't have been able to cover some of the new costs for materials. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. So there wouldn't have been, had we waited fully for the school division, honestly, like I said, they allowed us to do planning ahead of time, when in the past they haven't done that. I think that's a path they're going to start going down more, so that, usually they'll approve a project, say this project for 10 million, but then once design's done, it's 30 million. So, obviously that's hard to budget, right? So they want a little more work done. But so it would have, if we would have all waited together to tender this at once, we would have been right now. And so all the steel, which was significantly higher, obviously, I think on the school board's part, we were almost 2 million over on just on the steel. We would have been waiting till now for that steel also. And so, yes, I don't see it as having been, I think we would be in a much more difficult position had we waited on the entire thing to tender now. Interesting enough, we were the first sort of one in the group that's out now that came out with this kind of an increase, and I'm certain the province and the industry will be looking at this project here to know how they're going to have to price things in the future.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Avery.
My question is actually for Kyle. I appreciate you guys coming and explaining to us, but I just, for clarity on the funding, because I'm very much in favor of continuing with this project. So if we do another borrowing bylaw of 1.8 million approximately, what would that add on to our rec levy? $20 a year? It's not a significant amount to what we've got right now, is it?
Just a quick calculation. I didn't do one on the, for about $1 million over 20 years. Excuse me, that's about another $70,000 a year in payments. So it's not saying that an increase in the rec levy would be required. There's possible other options that looking to fund it. There is a potential that there might be a surplus of operation funds from the actual operation of the facility, that those could be used to kick back to fund that debenture as well. So when thinking of how to fund it, from our perspective, administration, the first option was never to look at increasing the rec levy. It was how can we perhaps fit this in with other operational budgets, and the first one being just the cost to run the rec center and the funds surplus from that yearly operation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So then, if I could ask our CAO or Kyle to go through options on how we are going to be covering this overage if we decide to move forward with it.
So under the financial impact section of the staff report on page 6, the total revised project budget cost now that it's been fully tendered is $17,694,210 for construction, $750,000 for consulting, and then we also recommend, in speaking with FWBA, our consultants, increasing the budget by an extra 3% to have a construction contingency for change orders or different items that may arise during the course of construction. So this isn't money that's guaranteed to be spent, but it is there so that we don't have to have a meeting like this in the future in the event that certain things arise. And that's for $435,397, bringing the total revised project budget to $18,879,607. And this is a shortfall from the previously budgeted amount of $3,129,607. So in speaking with the management team, what are some options on the way forward? We've developed a couple of different categories here for council. The first one is under the grants and fundraising header, hire a professional grant writer to work on a commission basis. The benefit of a project like this is that it's going to take place over the next 3 years, so we don't need the full amount of dollars this fiscal year or even next fiscal year. That gives us a couple of years to go and pursue grants quite diligently to see how much money we can actually find through the grant route between now and when the actual shortage is needed. The other recommendation is to increase the Coaldale Strong fundraising target from $1 million to $2 million, and then dedicate $1,387,000 from the unallocated 2022 MSI Capital and Canada Community Building Fund, which is money that hasn't been allocated that we have been given from the provincial government. And that effectively reduces the current project deficit down to $3 million, from $3,129,000 to $1,742,000. What do you do with the $1,742,000? Well, the hope is that you can find additional grants to chip away on that amount and to continue to fundraise diligently. But in the event that neither pan out as hoped, this is where the borrowing element comes in, and it ties into Deputy Mayor Avery's question, where we could prepare a borrowing bylaw in the amount of $1,742,000, but in the hopes that very little of it is actually needed. The strategy here is if grant hunting is not as successful as hoped, all proper paperwork and advertising for the capital asset, in this case the rec center, would be in place before the asset is fully constructed. We don't, however, from my understanding, have to pull the loan, nor the full amount that we advertise for until 2024 once the project's complete. This way we can see what the project cost actually comes in at, how much of your contingency you actually use, how much grant dollars you can receive, how much fundraising you can do before deciding if or to what extent you pull a portion of that bylaw. Our CFO, Kyle Beauchamp's been in discussions with the Alberta Capital Finance on the rules. I don't know if this would be a good time, just Mr. Mayor, for our CFO to provide some details on how that works, but I do think there is a timing issue with having at least the paperwork in place aside from when you decide to pull the funding.
Yeah, essentially under the MGA, we have to have the bylaw for the debenture passed through the various readings by council as well as advertised in accordance to the standards, so the 2 weeks minimum. So once the bylaw is authorized and approved, Caitlin's correct, you don't have to pull the full amount of the funds or pull it immediately. We can wait until we actually know what the final cost is going to be after, possible increases in grant funding or donations or changes with the contingency. that way you're not boring more than what you actually need. So if the bylaws advertised and passed for, say, 1.7 million, and you only need $1 million at the end, we would just request the loan for $1 million, and we're not using more debt than we have to on the project.
Then that brings us to the three different options that we've developed here. Staff, council, of course, is welcome to put an alternate option as they see fit on the table, but these were the three categorical paths that we came up with as staff. So option one, with respect to how to move forward, that council direct administration and the mayor to execute and lock in the bid prices contained in the Tender 3 package for the multi-use rec center. Further, that council amend the total current project budget of $15,750,000 to $18,879,607, and that's inclusive of the 3% contingency, with the understanding that the following funding strategy be deployed to bridge the current gap of $3,129,607. Hire the professional grant writer to work on a commission basis, increase the Coaldale Strong fundraising goal of $1 million to $2 million, dedicate $1,387,000 from unallocated 2022 MSI capital dollars, and then prepare a $1,742,607 borrowing bylaw. That's not 1 million, that should just be 1,742,607 borrowing bylaw, with the understanding that some or all of the loan only be pulled if needed in 2024. That's what we would consider option one, which allows you to proceed and to lock in the prices with the deadline we've been given of January 20th, with a fully finished product at the end. Option two, a little bit more simple, that council direct administration and the mayor to execute and lock in the bid prices contained in the Tender 3 package for the multi-use rec center, but direct administration to return to council with revised funding strategy. Whereas option one provides a very detailed path on how to go forward. Option two means council gives the green light, but doesn't like the funding formula, and we can come back as staff with some different options for council. And then option three is that council not award Tender 3 at this time, and then direct administration to bring back a phased construction plan, as well as the cost consequences of what that might look like. The one thing that I will say is that by not awarding on January 20th, we're not able to lock in the prices, and there is a risk that the prices go even further up, not down. And that might be something that if council is interested in, I would recommend just having a more detailed discussion with our panelists here, just to make sure the full consequence of that option is realized. And then following that, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to facilitate any further dialogue with council on any questions.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for our CFO. So then, if we proceed with this borrowing bylaw and all the points that Kaylin just spoke on, what's the comfort level for our residents at home that over the course of the next 3 years that we're going to see a tax increase solely because of this rec center going up during these difficult times?
Kind of to point back to kind of the question from Deputy Mayor Abry too, definitely there will be more funding required to fund any type of debenture, any type of loan. But as far as when we're looking at planning options and considering what we have to work with, definitely the first option is looking at the surplus that we project that we're going to have from operation of the rec facility, and to partially use some of that cash to help fund the debenture. There's also other ways to fund the debenture, and that's through looking for operational efficiencies if we need to. So we're looking likely between $70,000 to $100,000 a year to fund this debenture. So many options will be looked through, and we'll bring back a few options for council to consider. But a tax increase to fund that is definitely not on the top of the list of priority. While it's always something to consider, it's not the first option that we're looking at this moment.
Thank you. And then a follow-up question to that is, how is this going to affect our capital budget over the next few years on projects we spoke about, and we're going to be talking further about this weekend at our strat planning. Are some of these capital projects going to go under because of the rec center?
So when looking at the funding model and what would be needed, if we look at the debenture debt, say we're at the full 1.7 needed, that doesn't raise our debt level significantly. So if there was a future capital project that council wanted to fund, that was funded through debenture debt, this isn't putting us at risk of close to our debt ceiling, so that isn't an issue there. As far as the grant funding, the MSI and the Canada Building Fund that Kaylin had mentioned, those are grant dollars that are unallocated from 2022, so those could have been used towards any other type of capital project. That funding in the future is right now earmarked as part of that roads and deep utility replacement program, so that isn't affecting any future capital project. The only downside is 1.3 million that we hadn't unallocated, that council had the opportunity to allocate that to a particular capital project. That's most likely off the table for that 1 year funding as a result, but the good news isn't right now we're not stealing from any other project at this moment that these funds were allocated towards. So again, we are spending more money on with the grants and the debt funding, but it's not taking away from anything that's been allocated at this moment. And it might have a little impact on future capital projects, but that's not expected to be significant.
Okay, thank you. Kaylin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add one thing to our CFO's comments. Currently, there are 66 acres of residual land in and around the Joint High School Rec Center in Phase 2A of the Molloy Drain on the northwest side of Coaldale. Currently, any profits realized from that land sale have been tentatively set aside for core infrastructure improvements, for street roads, upsizing of sanitary. So there is some additional strategies for creating revenue by selling existing assets in the form of land to cover the cost of core infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions here. Just first to our CAO. This 607 contingency included, that only gets us to the walls, right? That that's included in there, right?
Great question. If you don't mind, I might just direct this to FWA just to make sure we get the details correct.
We do have the parking for the rec center, the primary parking included. The overflow parking, which is not paved, is a joint funded between the school and the rec center, so that'll be done. The landscaping immediately around the rec center is included to some degree, but to be perfectly honest, a lot of the landscaping will be picked up by Palliser. They're planning to do the sports field and a lot of the common general landscaping around the site.
If you don't mind. Yeah, Palliser plans on, we have quite a large cash allowance to do that work. We also, in all of the communities that we deal with, we work with various groups, if it's minor football or things like that, soccer associations to work together. We just completed a major makeover in Pitcher Butte at Dorothy Douglas School, and so we'll look for partners. But at this point, there's a significant cash allowance for Palliser to do most of that work. As Dan mentioned, just that like really close to your building piece where you put some seed in and landscape that to whatever you'd like. But as far as the other things, we plan on doing a vast majority of that in the beginning and then working with groups. I mean, if we wanted to go as far as Raymond with their new turf field, that would be working with, other grant providers, donors, minor league associations for football. So yeah, the plan in this whole plan is we'll have a fairly well-developed landscape at the conclusion.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And follow up, if you don't mind, to the panel. Obviously, I'm not an expert in this field But let's just say hypothetically that there were a pause button put on this tender and council didn't approve it for the 20th. The school is still going ahead, or it's still planned to go ahead, correct?
Yes, so
Is-
the school would continue.
Okay, so this would be our ultimate deadline to join the two. After the 20th, we don't have an avenue to join the two buildings after, correct?
Yes, and it becomes quite a bit more complicated because the way that we've designed the facility, the mechanical and electrical systems are heavily priced to the school side. And so if you were to stop this phase, we would have to build the wall that was between the two as a permanent wall because right now it's planned that there's two heated facilities. The boilers, the electrical system would be significantly altered, so there'd be some major redesign on our end, but we couldn't proceed with current design exactly, although we would proceed. It would have to be reduced so that in the event that you went at some other date, it would then end up being your full mechanical, your full electrical systems, which is where we start getting to that $25 million price tag. So it's fairly complex at this point because we did decide together that we would gain all the efficiencies we could by having one system instead of two. And we understand the school side's it's going to be obviously used a lot more than the rec center because we're going to have, it's a 900 capacity school, so we're going to have kids there all the time and staff, or most of the time. And then, we understand that that's going to be more utilized, but without the town, there would be significant issues. That's why I think some of the talk is around, the $4 million that's spent, but there's also a lot of cost that has been incurred in design for both parties to be together.
So it's not like putting an addition on a house. It's a lot more complex and intricate than that. Okay, thank you.
Engineers would have to go right back and start a lot of things over again. Yeah.
Okay, and then I just have one follow-up question back to what Colin from Ward Brothers mentioned. If we were to hit the pause button, it'd be in the range of 4.2 million based on these three tenders, correct?
Currently, what you have based on the tender package 1 and 2, not tender package 3. So
Right, I'm sorry, my mistake.
that's okay. So what Dexter was just saying, we haven't fully put the whole scope of numbers together to figure out what that would be if you did push the pause button.
Okay, and then that amount would include the engineering that's been done to date, all the groundwork that's been done to date, or is that something that needs to be tweaked as well yet?
That would include the groundwork and the steel. I can't speak to the consultants but Dan could probably speak to that. I would assume your cost to that, I would assume so, but as far as construction cost goes, that's the tender packages 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
The consulting fee that was mentioned earlier, to date, we've spent probably 3/4 of that for our work and the engineers' work. We still have about 25% allocated towards site review. So you've already committed 3/4, or you've already spent 3/4 of your fee.
Of 750,000.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from, go ahead,
I
Dexter.
just want to make sure I'm clear that in the event there was a pause, there would be a significant additional engineering and consulting price tag that I'm not sure what the province of the school board would feel like if they have to go back to a fairly significant, mechanical electrical is a big part of the school. That redesign piece, there would probably have to be some discussion there too about what that would cost the school board. Because the government likely, I don't know if they're going to want to put in extra money when we started out in terms of a partnership, just so that we're clear, there would
Okay.
have to be additional costs that were not previously spent.
Understood. Any other questions?
I think Councillor B.
Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Ryn. I would like to proceed with making a motion to accept option number 1, and that's the Council Direct Administration, and the Mayor to execute the package at 18.879607. I'd also like to add a fifth bullet to that, that the administration return to council with optional funding strategies, because I don't think we should ever let it stop, where if we, so I'm just kind of pulling that little piece out of option 2 and putting it into option 1, so we can make sure we visit it every quarter at least for the next 18 months.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and speaking in favor of the motion made by Deputy Mayor Abry on option number 1 and the fifth bullet as well, I support that entirely. I would either like to make a separate motion eventually or add this into the motion that the administration update quarterly reports of all construction projects to council from this point forward.
I believe Deputy Mayor Abry's bullet addition covers that off. Is that correct?
Is that your bullet point there? Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion? Being none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you to our panel. The next time we see you guys, I hope it's in a social setting.
I've also appreciated over the past 4 years the relationship with Palliser Schools, and this really puts into good faith that relationship and moving it forward.
Okay, and the last item is I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Reese, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.